I'd like you to introduce yourselves, if that's okay, one by one. I mean, I'm sure you pretty much know everyone anyway, but Joa from Sunlighten, do you want to tell us a bit more?
Yeah, so I'm Joa, I'm MD of Sunlighten in the UK. Sunlighten is a brand of saunas from the US. It's been around for about 22 years now. But we have recently launched another headquarters in the UK. And yeah, we're just happy to be here and share a bit more about our technology with you.
I just want to jump in. They're really good saunas. They're clean. They haven't got toxins, not cheap, nasty glues, good quality wood, all this stuff. So that's why they're here, FYI. So I just want to throw that one in at the beginning. So, Justin.
Hey, Tim. Thanks, guys. I'm Justin McGuire, owner of Autonomic Coaching. Basically, I look into people's bodies, figure out what's wrong, and get them back into living in the most optimal state that they should be living within, just by identifying rate-limiting factors and giving them the opportunity to live life back. That's my deal.
Hello, everybody. I'm trying to out-angle him and not being very successful.
I did wear my jersey today.
Yeah. But I'm Chris Gethin. I am the co-founder of Cage Supplements and Chris Gethin Gyms, and I'm here to help people understand that they can perform as an athlete but not increase their biological age while they do it, as a lot of athletes do. So, you know, we want to be healthy on the inside and recover and not just look great on the outside.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm not even going to try and out-angle any of them. I need to do some more work on that. So, okay, cool. So what we'll do is we'll run through a few questions that we prepared, and then we'll put some questions to you guys for anything that might be hanging, okay? So, opening question. Humans are natural detoxifiers. Why do we need to focus on detoxification? Start with you, Joa.
Well, this is an easy one. I think that, yes, whilst we definitely naturally have the internal systems to metabolize toxins, we're just absolutely not equipped to cope with the barrage of toxins that come at us these days. I think there was a recent study which showed that there's about 3 times the amount of chemicals and chemical compounds out there that we thought there were. So there's about 350,000 different types of chemicals out there. And, you know, whilst we might think, oh, I'm super healthy and I'm doing everything I can, it's very difficult to escape those in the body. And you know, as they accumulate, they also will deplete your nutrients, can affect your DNA and have a really, really, you know, a bad impact on your health. And so you might not know that you have a high level of toxicity, but you might have a whole bunch of other symptoms which, you know, brain fog and all sorts of other things happening which are a result of toxicity. So most people, you know, really aren't aware.
I mean, I just want to jump in quickly before we move on to the brains. We're living in a toxic world, and as Dr. Jenny Goodman said yesterday, it's very hard to detoxify because our livers weren't designed to process as many chemicals in the air, in the water, in the food, everywhere. So upregulating detoxification any way we can is important, especially with genetic mutations and things like that going on. And if you go into the northern hemisphere or look at Finland, they have a sauna in every house. They don't get enough sunlight for a start, and having things like saunas are important for them. So I just wanted to caveat with my opinion before we pass on to the detail. Go for it, Justin.
Well, I think the biggest reason, to be honest with you, is we are not living in our current state of society nowhere near the natural Hertz resonance of this Earth. Now, I'll sort of put it a little bit of context. The reason as to why Earth is able to survive in the state in which it is because of its resonance has an opposite co-resonant impact against cosmic radiation. So now think of it. We are shifting the way in which we expose ourselves to frequencies well above the healthy norm, disorientating ourselves in doing so, and we're increasing the intake of toxins. And we're wondering why we're getting sick. So I truly believe that, they've done recent studies to see about having rocket fuel and umbilical cord and so on, and the increased rise of these occurrences over the last 20 years. I believe why there's such a huge increase in the rise isn't necessarily just because there are more toxins in our food sources and our water sources and so on, is because our ability to be able to remove those toxins has deteriorated, because we're no longer living in a terra-formed environment. We're living in a terrestrial formed environment, detached and detracted from the natural hertz frequencies of this earth, which is causing disease. And this is the reason why we need to look into ways to optimize how we can detoxify.
Drops the mic.
I really wish I wasn't on the end now. My answer's going to be so paltry compared to yours. But of course, yeah, I'm going to talk specifically more from an athletic standpoint. So, as I mentioned in my talk yesterday, when I was, focusing specifically on bodybuilding, I was eating probably twice the amount of the average person, if not a lot more. So I wasn't looking at the food sources like wild caught, humane raised, organic, or anything like that. So I was taking in a lot more antibiotics, even though I wasn't prescribed them, than the average person. So of course, it's of no coincidence that I had a lot of toxicity in my body, whether that come from contaminants of heavy metals or from mold or anything like that, but from the antibiotics. And as I mentioned, through my detoxification process, whether that be sauna, detoxing with binders, certain food groups, and supplementation, then I was able to get rid of not just the inflammation that I had from my brain, but from my joints that I thought was from bodybuilding, because every bodybuilder has inflammation because we work out. When I went through that detoxification, I got rid of a lot of that inflammation. And this is what I try to pass on to other people. We have to detox because of our environment, because of the estrogens in our water or the pollutants in our food or in the air, especially if you're living in a place like London, as Tim has mentioned before. When he's traveling overseas and he's on a beach, he doesn't really find that he has to do so much biohacking because he's closer to his natural environment. But in a place like this, you have to detox a little bit more and biohack a little more.
If anyone's interested to read a bit more, you should have a look at this book. It's a really old book, but it exemplifies what we're talking about. Detoxify or Die. It goes through a lot of these toxins and just how much we are exposed to them and how serious it really is. So
starting with you, Chris.
Thank God.
Just kidding. No. So what are the core things that you think you need to be able to do to detox properly, Chris?
Everybody's going to be different. But, I always like to look at, blood panels or, different forms of tests. So, for instance, with me, it was a brain scan that signified that I had mold toxicity. So obviously my detox protocol would be a little bit different for the next person. But if it's through your liver, or you could be looking at certain types of supplementation, glutathione, NAC, anything like that. That's going to take a lot of the burden away from your liver, so you can detox. But as you know, I do sauna every single day. Even though I was recycling a lot of the toxicity that I had because I had the metal amalgams, I just wanted to detox every single day. So the sauna is part of that protocol. So, whether it be binders, whether it be sauna, but sweating is obviously good through exercise, through movement, and trying to get in clean air. As we know, the environment in our home is much worse a lot of the time than the environment outside. So making sure that we're purifying our house with clean air. At home we have reverse osmosis water with a remineralizer to help with that detoxification. So there's various things, and making sure that even the skincare that you're using hasn't got toxins and parabens and phthalates in there, because obviously on a hot day with your pores are open, my wife thought I was winding her up about this morning actually, but if you want to make sure, so for instance when I'm in India, I know that I can't drink the water there, so I always have cold showers all the time, because I don't want to take in a lot of those toxins from the water with a hot shower with open pores.
Justin?
That's very...
You cringe every time.
Can I go first?
You can.
I'm kidding.
I think it's very important to be able to assess your capacity to take on stress, first and foremost. So there are certain detoxification capacities that are going to increase the liberation of toxins. And if your nervous system is in the state to contend with them, it's going to heighten the redirection of vital amino acids, the redirection of how lymphocytes are interacting in what's happened to other metabolics or metabolites being produced by that. So first, figure out where you are within your autonomic tone. How sympathetically dominant are you? What's your HRV status? What are your glucose variables doing? What are your pulse variables doing? What are your temperature variables doing? Is your sleep in the right state? Fix your sleep, fix your antioxidant status prior to detoxification. One of the biggest mistakes I see is that people want to run straight into getting rid of all the toxins in their body without doing the groundwork. If you don't have enough antioxidants before going into a detoxification process, you're going to make things worse. And the reason why you're going to make things worse is because it's going to incite depression as well. I'll talk a little bit more about this as we get into it, but there is a particular pathway with a 3-letter acronym called IDO, which can be massively increased in its activity, which compromises how your body produces serotonin and how it regulates it. So that's just one compromising factor if you detox or if you approach detoxification incorrectly. So in order to prepare, figure out your autonomic position, make sure to re-establish healthy antioxidant activity, not just levels, but activity. And there's a big difference. Intracellular glutathione is not the same as just having glutathione in your body. Are your cells able to utilize it? And if they aren't, why? And figure that out. Remove the obstacles, and then create a detoxification.
Exactly what he said.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how I could add to that, but I think that, initially we need to stop putting the toxins in. I think don't even attempt to begin a detoxification unless you have a look at really what you're doing day to day, what's coming on your body or near your body. And then look at, really supporting your body through that detoxification process. Maybe use a professional to help you as well, and take it slow.
Awesome. So one thing I just want to touch on is the genetic component here, because there's an elephant in the room for me anyway, which is the MTHFR specifically. Who here knows what the MTHFR gene is? Okay, that's not a bad amount. Justin.
Yes.
What is the MTHFR specifically?
Well, it's a gene that's involved in the folate's contribution towards methylation, and the impact that can have on methionine metabolism as a whole, and subsequently what that does in creating other precursors for production of neurotransmitters, subsequent breakdown into other hormones as well. So when you have a compromise of this particular gene, in essence, the balance between energy production and output and antioxidant production and contention to that output becomes completely distorted. And you find yourself to be in a state of either excessive hyperinflammation or in a state of excessive cellular senescence. So cellular senescence is basically zombie-like cells, where the cells stop functioning in their normal capacity to be able to regulate biological outcomes. And one of the means and measures to express that is if you're not contributing towards healthy folate metabolism due to an impaired innate capacity to convert folate.
And my understanding, in a summary, is methylation. It's MTHFR is methylation, which is basically about energy production and detoxification in its simplest form. And around 40% of the population have a mutation, which means that they don't detoxify properly as a result. So for instance, and I'm talking to several of you in the crowd that I know have had a problem with mercury detoxification, myself included, that impairs your detoxification, and when you have mercury poisoning, it makes it even harder to methylate, so it becomes a circular issue. So that's just something I'd like to touch on quickly now. So MTHFR and how that ties in, and how saunas can help with detoxification when you're not detoxifying metals properly. That's the next thing. So, Chris, you're not looking at me, so I presume you want me to...
Oh, no, carry on. Carry on.
I was like, shall I? Yeah, let's actually, Justin, do you want to jump in with this one? I think that's probably best in this case, if you want to talk about how sauna, MTHFR, and how it can help in this regard.
Okay. I think it's very important that even if you are expressing this particular type of gene, that again, you need to look into the increased requirement your body perceives it has for production of glutathione and antioxidants, first and foremost. Infrared sauna can ramp up the activity of the folate methylation cycle, giving you the opportunity of mitochondrial regeneration, a better electron transport, and not only in the improved capacity of tricarbolic acids, enzyme interactions, but actually providing donors to an electron transport chain. Yes, it certainly can do. But, and there's a very big but, do you want to have that happen? What if your mitochondria are in this particular danger response state, whereby they're actually trying to limit the excessive production and release of ATP? Why? Because ATP doesn't just fuel human cells, it can also fuel unwanted insults from microbes, parasites, bacteria, and the like. So yes, infrared saunas, they can help to improve the capacity to produce energy, to produce ATP, to regenerate mitochondria. But you need to ask and really assess whether that is something that you should bypass and regenerate. If there's, for example, if you don't use it, you lose it. So if your body's been under a state of constant, perpetual strain and infection, it's going to down-regulate how much ATP it produces because it's trying to protect itself. If that happens over a period of time, it forgets how to do that. And then, yes, utilizing infrared saunas and a whole host of other detoxification methods to upregulate mitochondrial health is fantastic. But if you're still in the depths of this immunological compromise, and you go and you put yourself in a position where you're heightening the fuel that's actually can contribute towards proliferation of your immunological compromise, then you're going to compromise your health, as simply put.
Thank you. One thing I want to say is, if you haven't, well, actually, who's had their DNA tested here? So probably about 40%. If you haven't already, go and get your DNA tested. There's 2 companies here that do it, 3 companies here that do it today, all for different reasons. And you can see if you have the MTHFR gene, SNP. I really recommend it. They're super cheap these days. And you can find out so much about your health. And a lot of these systems now actually tell you directly without you having to read the raw data whether or not you have it. And then if you do, using things like saunas and some of the things we're just about to touch on in a minute will help.
Tim, do you mind if I just interject this one thing? If you're going to look into your genetics, very important to look into this particular detoxification markers, but also look into other markers that have an association with it as well, like your MAO and your COMT genes. It is not just about the rate of detoxification or the rates of production towards energy. It's also about the rates of filtration that the body naturally goes through in breaking down certain catalysts for energy production. So you need to make sure that it's one thing to have a compromised function of a particular snippet or a particular gene, but it's actually looking at a holistic perspective of how that interrelates to other aspects of genetic expression itself, not just detoxification.
And what I was just about to say was, which is why it's important for you to work with a practitioner like Justin to unravel this stuff, to lay it out in a way so you can implement it. So, okay, cool. So the next question is, what supplements are your recommendation for improving detoxification? So I'm going to start with Chris on that one and work this way, if I may.
Yeah, so like you said, it all depends if, for instance, you don't want to be taking certain binders, activated charcoal or anything like that if you do have a lot of, toxicity in your body and you're just going to recycle that. If you've got a lot of mercury in your mouth, you don't want to recycle a lot of this toxicity. But there's certain things, like glutathione, high-level glutathione, NAC is a supplement that I do suggest to my clients as well. If it's something specifically for, liver enzymes, it's got to be something like TUDCA. I'm just going to go very high antioxidants a lot of the time. If there's a lot of damage, a lot of free radical damage within the system, we need to go very high antioxidants. So that's usually the specific supplement protocol I go for. And, dependent on that person, again, I work with a lot of athletes. A lot of athletes consume a lot of food. So on their non-training days, I generally get them to fast, which is very alien to a lot of athletes because they're usually consuming at least 6 meals a day, a lot of shakes, a lot of essential amino acids. So I do try to take away a lot of the burden, the stress on their digestive system so their body can better detox by doing some controlled fasting on their non-training days.
Nice one. So, Justin.
Just to add to that as well, what you're talking about the amino acids, I think it's very, very important to ascertain the nitrogen-sulfur balance when it comes to detoxification, the aids that you need around that. If you have an impaired nitrogen detoxification, you're going to have excessive amounts of ammonia. And it doesn't matter if you're going to be putting in glutathione, NAC, or any other sulfur donor to aid detoxification, that imbalance is going to further wreak havoc throughout the body, in particular creating poor recycling of what they call pyrimidines. Now, pyrimidines are very important to stabilize your DNA, stabilize your RNA, and what that does has an impact directly on your cell membranes, directly an impact on how your body uses glucose, stores glycogen, and also how it creates nucleotides, which are the expressions of life itself. So first figure out what it is, what's your nitrogen doing, what's your sulfur doing, and ways into rectifying that is by incorporating like sulfur-rich water in states and times after you have dealt with nitrogen metabolism. And that can be compromised due to bacterial overgrowth, compromised because of genetic anomalies, a whole vast multitude of reasons. The supplement that I like to use, if you do have high amounts of ammonia, however, is alpha-ketoglitaric acid in its standalone form, not arginine alpha-ketoglutarate, alpha-ketoglitaric acid on its own. It's a really great, and then in specific scenarios using TMG, but then again, also case specific. TMG can actually create things to become a lot worse if you have heightened sympathetic activities going on in the brain and nervous system as well. So everything has, in essence, everything's case specific. So if I'm going to give you my recommendation, please just do so with very due care to figure out whether or not it's the right recommendation for you. But in general, alpha-ketoglutaric acid works well to neutralize ammonia. Thereafter, nicotinic acid works well to prevent excessive buildup production of a neuroinflammatory particle called quinolinic acid. It also helps to redirect tryptophan to be utilized better for tryptamine receptors activity, creating better balance in the brain and the body. And then Grolsteiner water from Germany, which has a high concentration of lithium, which is very important to activate glutathione S-transferase activity to provide its opportunity of detoxification to take place on an intracellular complex.
Wow.
Are you recording this? So I need to watch it like 18 times.
I got all of it. I got all of it completely.
What do you think about Pellegrino water as sulfur-rich water to use?
No, I think Pellegrino water is great. I think it needs to be balanced out with the water with higher lithium content in it as well, because it obviously has a higher sulfur content, which means it will ramp up antioxidant activity. But with ramping up antioxidant activity, lithium stores are also going to be depleted. So you need to make sure that whatever mineral, this is why no waters are created equal, and you need to really figure out what's going on within your mineral status as to what water sources are going to be most beneficial to you. And yeah, that's why I like to use Pellegrino in the morning, and I like to use Grolsteiner in the evening because of the difference within the concentration of lithium and sulfur that either water sources have.
Okay, you can use Pellegrino water. I've got that.
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes.
In the context, it's always in individual context, and that's the thing is that if you're going to approach your health with a cookie cutter approach and get bad results, you got to ask yourself as to why that's happened, because you're not taking your individual symptoms and experience into account. It's very important that you claim responsibility, and the word responsibility, I love when you break it down, the ability to respond. We all have the ability to respond because we all have a sense of what's going on in our bodies. And in doing so, you can have a good outcome. But just doing the stock standard stuff, more often than not, this creates frustration. And also disbelief, because the marketing message says something, you're not experiencing it because it wasn't done in the right context. As simple as that.
So guys, can you guess who I work with these days for my health, by any chance?
I've already filled out a consultation form for him as well. But I got a question, because I know that you've gone through a lot of detoxification because you got into this because you were sick. What did you do specifically to help detox, especially in an environment like being in London?
That's a really good question. Well, for me, I did a hair mineral analysis test which told me I was really high in mercury, which is where it began. So I started with mercury detoxification protocols, pretty heavy ones, which were a bit too heavy for my body to deal with, which set me back, kind of like a year, 18 months with chronic fatigue and loads of things like that. I could do 10 minutes of sauna at the time, any more than that wiped me out, which actually comes on to our next question in a minute, which is pretty quite cool. And it really set me back a long way. Actually, I know there's several people in the audience that have had similar issues with mercury again, and not being able to have saunas or taking too much glutathione or whatever, blah, 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 blah. So for me, sauna was very gentle, and I would get migraines that wiped me out for 2 days if I had sauna, because I didn't understand how important hydration was or what to do for hydration. Also upregulating my MTHFR gene with methylfolate, trimethylglycine, B12, and various other protocols, which I went at alone for a long time, actually, until I realized that actually I can do more damage than good. But I do think that if there's one thing that I think is absolutely critical, is getting your body hot at least twice a week. And I think with a sauna, if you've got that luxury, that's great, doing that. If not, then a magnesium bath with Epsom salts. Not too hot, not too much magnesium, because if you put over 500 grams in a hot bath, then you lose a kilo of water almost. And I weighed myself before and after and did, and then that put you in bed with a migraine. So, you have to go carefully. So I think for really sauna and magnesium baths and
Tim,
supporting.
Can I just add something to that?
Yeah,
If anybody's going to be adding Epsom salts to their bath, put sodium bicarbonate with it. Okay, it helps to offset the imbalance that it creates to the hydration status after doing the bath, because of the carbon dioxide effect that it has. 100 grams to 500 grams. So for every 500 grams of Epsom salts, 100 grams of sodium bicarbonate.
So I'm going to open it up to some questions here for a minute before we go on to the next question. And how much time have we got left? Can someone do 1 minute? Oh, 10 minutes.
10
okay.
minutes.
So you said 1 and she said 10. Okay, cool. So let's open it up to questions. So, okay, this lady right here.
I've been suffering for many, many years. I've been all over the world, like for almost 40 years. And I found out there was nothing, it was like 7 years ago, I found out I was so poisoned with mercury. I was not able to work because of it. And this is my best year, last year. And I've been using coffee enema to increase my glutathione. And I feel terrific. I always look forward to doing it. But you are not mentioning anything about coffee.
So, did everyone hear that? I heard a yes and a no equally then. So, hands up if you didn't. Okay, good. So, she said that she's had mercury issues and she's been doing coffee enemas, which has worked. So, who wants to take this?
Well, to be honest, there was a study done by the Walsh Institute where a whole host of autistic kids that generally had a high heavy metal toxic burden were exposed to chelation therapies. And I know you're probably thinking, why is he talking about chelation and talking about coffee enemas? Well, there's actually a relation to it. They generally noticed that they had about a 10 to 14 day period where they improved their symptoms, and then generally all their expression of the symptoms reversed up until about 14 days in. After the 14 days, symptoms started to appear again. And what they were able to realize from this, it wasn't the chelation that was creating the most dramatic effect, it was the antioxidant effect that the chelators actually produced in the body. You must understand we are going to be constantly exposed to heavy metals, regardless of what you do or you don't do. And quantity obviously depends upon other factors. However, it is the capacity and the availability of your antioxidant status that protects you from the negative outcome of what they can do into the body. That being said, the more heavy metals that you do contain, the more of an emphasis again, and I'll say again, is to ensure that your antioxidant activity and uptake is optimal.
Any other questions?
I have a methylation question for you, sir. So you discovered you've got a methylation issue.
What can I ask? What is
Hold
the
on,
methylation
actually, I'm going to give
issue?
you the mic.
So you figured out you've got a methylation problem.
Before you go on, may I ask what is the methylation problem?
The 5-MTHF.
Okay, what are the symptoms? And the reason I bring this up, it's very important because most practitioners treat a test.
Yeah.
You need to treat the person.
I've got quite a long list to tell you, but
Okay.
probably not. But the question is,
Absolutely.
so you've figured out you've got this lack, and you start introducing the 5-MTH. So you're opening pathways, detox pathways that have been shut for how long they've been shut. So that creates detox.
And that's a mistake. You should never do that straight off the bat.
So what should you do to reduce the startup side effects?
Firstly, you got to figure out what is the greatest symptom burden, not just about what is the most compromised objective finding through a test. And then you address supporting the symptom burden prior to trying to upregulate or to balance out MTHFR activity or folate metabolism within the methylation complex as a whole. I'm not a big fan of 5-methyltetrahydrofolate. I really am not. And even in those with the gene, expression. And the reason for that is there's no rate limiting step in its ability to provide methyl donors. It creates a massive immediate reaction to methylation. Whereas in comparison, folinic acid, there is a rate limiting step. And the rate limiting step isn't that of which people who are expressing that gene have a compromised ability to not express. You can still, even with that gene, create the conversion from folinic acid into 5-MTHF. However, the body provides blockades for you not to do it in a scenario that you shouldn't be doing it. It's the same with use of NAD. I think NAD is useful in very limited contexts and situations. I do not think that it should be utilized widely on an ongoing basis because, again, it is a very powerful molecule that can help the regeneration of cells. Yes, it helps the mitochondria in the production of ATP. And it is involved in the entirety of the tricarbolic acid cycle, for sure. But the body stops producing it for a particular reason. Why? Because foreign cells, invaders, microorganisms, consume NAD as well. It's just why they call it NAD steal. So you have to really ask yourself, if you're going to upregulate anything, firstly, you have to ask yourself, why is the body downregulated in the first place? Deal with that first before restoring the body. Remove, replenish, then restore. Very important to follow that order of precedence. And it's, again, not the restoration of a lab, the restoration of a person's experience and quantifying the subjective from the experience to the objective in the findings of the lab.
So I think you guys should chat afterwards. Summary of that. Awesome.
Pleasure.
We have one more question. I think. Okay, cool.
Okay. Thanks. This question's for Justin.
Right.
When it comes to MTHFR gene variant and people are suffering from symptoms, would you ever recommend the removal of grains and folate from the diet as the principal treatment for this before you start adding anything else in, like 5-MTHF? Would you go more along the lines of excluding, so you're not... When we look at the folate cycle, and the fact that it's affecting the methylation cycle, if we don't put the folic acid in, then it doesn't need to donate itself, And so an exclusion of folic acid, would that be what you would recommend, particularly with children, especially on the spectrum?
In terms of from natural food sources, it's not just about, to answer this question, you're not just looking at the impact that folate is having on the complexity of biochemical reactions, you're looking at the impact that the other particles in those food sources contribute towards the unwanted effect that folate may have. As an example, in particular grains, for lectins, as one example itself, would have a compromising impact into the minerals' interaction with the folate cycle, furtherwise in causing magnesium dumping and disassociation within calcium signaling. So food is not a supplement. It is not produced in singularity. It is produced in complex synergy. And when we include or exclude foods, we have to ask ourselves, why is it that we're doing it? And again, this is looking at health not from a state of disease, but in a state of optimizing wellness. And this is where we need to generally change our paradigm of understanding, holistic thinking into all systems, not just a finite symptom or disease.
I mean, I think what our ancestors did is a great place to start. To be
Absolutely.
fair. And I think all these supplements and everything is great, and it's a great way to hack the body, but really without the fundamentals and the basics. I mean,
but Tim, can I just add with what you're saying about the ancestors? It's so important that we really take that into full context, because when people follow a Paleolithic diet, they forget that a lot of the foods on a Paleolithic diet were not available throughout the entire year. Our ancestors ate seasonally as well as through Paleolithic means. So if you're following a Paleolithic diet and you're not including seasonal considerations in its application, you're not following what our ancestors did.
Yeah. Good point. Very, very good point. So I think we need to wrap this up because I've just been given the sign.
Sorry, Tim. Sorry.
My brain's going, how can I wrap this back round to saunas?
I guess
somehow?
I can. I mean, also with saunas, I mean, our ancestors or people have known for thousands of years, they sit in a sweat lodge and they are going to be healthy. So it's something intuitive we've all known for a long time. And, you know, for a long time there hasn't necessarily been science to back that up. Recently there has been a fairly interesting study called the blood, urine, sweat study, which has shown that mercury, cadmium especially, and a few other metals definitely are secreted from sweat, and even when people are not testing up showing these metals in their blood or urine, they're actually showing up in their sweat, specifically after sauna usage. So the science is there that sweating in a sauna will help you detox those metals. So it's a useful part of your protocols.
Awesome. So first things first, go and check out Sunlighten right at the front of the hall. I'm sure Justin is going to be inundated after this. So please, every single one of you, stop and ask Justin a question each. And thank you very much, guys. It's been brilliant. And
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.